Tens of thousands of years ago, during the Ice Age, the Earth's climate was much colder, and glaciers locked up much of the planet's water. A land bridge, called Beringia, connected Asia and North America across what is now the Bering Strait. Following herds of animals, small bands of humans crossed this natural passage, gradually spreading across the Americas over thousands of years. These early settlers became the ancestors of the indigenous peoples of the Americas. They formed diverse cultures, from the bustling city of Tenochtitlan to the sophisticated mound builders of Cahokia and the Inca Empire in the Andes. By the time Europeans arrived, the Americas were home to tens of millions of people, with thriving civilizations, trade networks, and complex societies. Fast forward to the late 15th century. Europe was undergoing profound changes, with advances in navigation, shipbuilding, and a thirst for trade. Spices, silk, and gold from Asia were in high demand, but overland trade routes were controlled by powerful Ottoman and Islamic empires. European nations sought a sea route to Asia. In this context, Christoffel Columbus, an ambitious navigator from Genoa, proposed sailing west across the Atlantic to reach Asia. He believed the Earth was smaller than it is, and that Asia could be reached relatively quickly. After years of lobbying, Columbus secured funding from King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain. In 1492, Columbus set sail with 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. After weeks at sea, he landed not in Asia, but on an island in the Bahamas, which he named San Salvador. He went on to explore parts of the Caribbean, including modern-day Cuba and Hispaniola, where he encountered indigenous peoples such as the Taino. Columbus believed he had reached Asia, but his voyages sparked a wave of exploration and colonization that would change the world forever. Though he never set foot on the mainland of North America, Columbus's expeditions marked the beginning of European imperialism in the Americas. After Columbus's voyages, other European explorers followed. Amerigo Vespucci, an Italian navigator, realized that Columbus had not reached Asia, but had discovered a new world. In his honor, cartographers began labeling the continents as America. Another explorer is Vasco da Gama. In 1497, King Manuel I of Portugal appointed Vasco da Gama to lead an expedition to India. The goal was to find a direct sea route to the lucrative spice markets of Asia, bypassing the overland trade routes controlled by the Ottoman Empire and other Middle Eastern powers. Da Gama's famous journey began on July 8, 1497, from the Portuguese port of Lisbon. He set sail with a fleet of 4 ships. His route took him down the west coast of Africa, rounding the treacherous Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of the continent. This was a challenging and dangerous part of the journey, but Vasco da Gama and his crew managed to navigate through it, despite storms and uncertain conditions. The fleet then continued up the east coast of Africa, making stops in places like Mozambique and Mombasa in modern-day Kenya. Finally, after months at sea, on May 20th, 1498, Vasco da Gama and his men reached the port of Calicut, now Kozhikode, on the southwestern coast of India. This was the first direct sea route from Europe to India. In 1513, Vasco Núñez de Balboa crossed the Isthmus of Panama and became the first European to see the Pacific Ocean. In 1519, Hernán Cortés arrived in Mexico, leading to the fall of the Aztec Empire. Around the same time, Francisco Pizarro conquered the Inca Empire in South America. These conquests brought vast wealth to Spain, but at a devastating cost to indigenous peoples. Most of these stories are the ones that are being told in several countries. But what if I told you that it wasn't Columbus or Amerigo Vespucci or anyone else we just talked about who was the first European to discover North America? In fact, we have to go back 500 years before the time of Columbus, Vespucci, and the others, around the year 1000. Around the year 1000, a group of Norse explorers, led by Leif Erikson, set sail from Greenland. Leif was the son of Eric the Red, a Viking who had established settlements in Greenland, after being exiled from Iceland for 3 years, after a dispute with his neighbor led to a confrontation and eventually many casualties. Inspired by tales of a land to the west, Leif and his crew ventured across the North Atlantic. They landed in a place they called Vinland, likely in modern-day Newfoundland, Canada. The Norse built small settlements and interacted with the local indigenous peoples, whom they called Skraelings. However, conflicts with the indigenous inhabitants and the difficulty of sustaining the colony led the Norse to abandon Vinland after a few years. For centuries, their story survived only in the sagas, half forgotten by history until archaeological evidence at Lonso Meadows confirmed their presence. While Columbus and the Norse are the most famous discoverers, other theories suggest earlier contact. For example, Polynesians may have reached South America before Columbus, as suggested by the presence of sweet potatoes, native to the Americas in Polynesia. Some propose that ancient Chinese explorers, like those under Admiral Zheng He, might have reached the Americas in the 15th century, though evidence remains speculative, and thus not a reliable source. Today, the narrative of discovery is being re-examined. Indigenous voices highlight that their ancestors lived in the Americas for thousands of years before Europeans arrived. The idea of discovery erases their history and contributions. Instead, historians frame the story as one of encounter, exchange, and conquest. Leif Erikson, Columbus, and others all played roles in the global story of exploration, but the real history of the Americas began with its original inhabitants, whose stories continue to shape the land today.